mean, I kind of want to talk about China's medical technology stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew, like you said, you spent a lot of years doing business in China, especially in that sector, and there's a lot of, it's pretty evident that that over the last decade or so, like one of the long-term things that China wants to do is to become a leader in biotech and medical in the medical field in general. And we already see a lot of, for right now, it's things like masks or alcohol wipes, like kind of not expensive things being made in China, but we are becoming more dependent on them. How do you see this going? Are they going to be successful in becoming this biotech giant?
They want to become the umbrella corporation or company. Resident Evil, Shelley?
I've never played it. Sorry.
So Shelley, that's a great question, and it's a huge topic because healthcare is super complex, right? It encompasses everything from aged care to infectious diseases and all sorts of things. And it's a controversial subject in every country. But it's interesting. Noel Ferguson from Stanford Hoover Institute, who I'm a huge admirer of, he did a series called History, is the West History, about the rise of China and the challenge of China to the Western world. And he put it that the Western world has been able to maintain a gap on the rest for the last 500 years, basically since the Portuguese arrived in Macau, because of what he called were 5 or 6 killer apps. One of those killer apps is Western medicine, and how that's evolved over a long, long period of time, and how it's cultural. If you look at the rise of East Asia, the tiger economies beforehand, and they figured out how to industrialize and make an automobile, a good car, in the space of probably about 25 years. But medicine and healthcare is, it's a very complex ecosystem. So for example, in China, where you don't have an independent judiciary, because of that, you don't have a medico-legal system, right? You can't take a private hospital or even a state-owned hospital to court. You're going to have a hard time taking a drug company to court and that sort of thing. My last trip to China, late 2017, it was on behalf of a Texas company called G-Con Bio, and they make pods. They're essentially biopharmaceutical factories that are made off-site, and then they look like kind of big shipping containers, but they have the HEPA filters and all the air control and all that stuff. They can also be used for patient isolation. And Pfizer was an early investor in G-Con. So Pfizer was able to make its COVID-19 vaccine in half the time because they ordered these pods and they wheeled them into a shell building. They didn't have to build a new factory. But that meeting was about CRISPR, which is a cutting-edge gene editing technology that's used against cancer. But whether it's CRISPR or clinical trials around vaccines, and China has a horrendous legacy issue around vaccines, they jump steps in the clinical go-to-market.
Well, there was the case where a couple of years ago where a scientist created 2 CRISPR human twins that were supposed to be immune to AIDS or something.
In China, but then he got essentially disavowed by the Chinese government, right?
Because it was a scandal.
He Jiankui, he was arrested because of the scandal, actually, because that scandal created a great loss of face. But it's, I've been to a lot of surgical conferences over the years. The guys from mainland China are generally on last, and most people don't hang around too often. There's cancer patients in China that are paying good money to have online consultations with oncologists in the US because of the trust factor. Now, on the equipment side, Shelley, when I first went to China in '88, people didn't have fridges and all these sorts of things. I remember visiting a hire factory in Qingdao back in the day. And of course, they're the #1 white goods manufacturer in the world now. But I've also been to the China Medical Equipment Fair, which is this, in Shenzhen, which is this huge scale thing. And China makes, there's a company called Mindray or Mindray out of Shenzhen. And they make, they're in a lot of hospitals around the world. They make good equipment. At that trade show, I saw Chinese companies making advanced technology products like MRI the companies that weren't around 5 years before that. And there's a company based out of Shanghai that recently bid for a contract with the University of Sydney Medical Centre, and they're making PET-CT. So that's a pretty advanced technology. The problem is not with the ability to make good equipment. The problem is in the software, i.e. the people skills and the discipline around good clinical studies before you take a product to market. And I'd also add that if you're a foreign company and you're trying to commercialize medical technology in China, like for other sectors in the economy, it's difficult, but it's particularly difficult. I mean, I'm involved with another Texan company in the medical imaging space, and it's taken them 7 years to get FDA, and it's cost a lot of money. But, the process is challenging because the FDA wants to make sure that before this technology is deployed in vivo, i.e. out in the real world, it works. It's safe and efficacious. And those guardrails, as I mentioned, are kind of avoided in China. Is this race to catch up or surpass the West, as it were. This is it's been, if you're trying to get a product through the SFDA, which is the Chinese version of the FDA, they use that as a way to get their hands on your IP, on your blueprint. So it's a very, very tough market, and there's corruption all over the Chinese medical system. It's generally a pay up front, you jump the queue type of proposition, and doctors there are paid poorly, so they're not incentivized to do anything else in terms of their annual remuneration. I hosted a couple of German surgeons on a trip to about 3 or 4 cities in China at one stage, and they were doing lectures and being involved in a couple of live surgeries and so on. I remember being in Changsha, I think it was, and I was in the operating room, and people were going in and out of the operating room. People were using their mobiles in sort of the operating room. I've never seen anything like it in a Western country. But the 2 German surgeons, good teaching hospital, university in Germany, but they were from the former East Germany, and we took them to Lushan, which was kind of a summer retreat for Chairman Mao, and they were just like, get us the hell out of here. This is the last place we want to be. But I remember being down in Guangzhou, and we were having dinner with one surgeon, and he suggested to the 2 German professors, he said, we'll use this company's device. This patient had bilateral hernias, and he said, look, we'll use this company's device on one of them, and we'll use this other company's device on the other. And one of the German surgeons shook his head. He said, no. He said, we don't experiment on real patients, So there was, China's got a long way to go before it's going to be able to compete and compare with medicine compared to, US, UK, and other countries. It's got a long way to go.
Now we know that, because of recent research, that China is essentially using its doctors, its surgeons as executioners, harvesting organs of still living people. So this is going to be a real problem when the doctors themselves are essentially just tools of the state.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why they're trying to keep the organ harvesting stuff so, they're faking organ donation data. There's been research that's shown that the organ donation data follows the quadratic formula. It's impossible things.
They're kind of even lazy about how they fake the data.
I think that's one of the reasons that the idea that these hospitals, the military hospitals or whatever, are doing these essentially killing prisoners of conscience for their organs. They have to keep a lid on that because that's going to blow up their whole, reputation with what they want to do in terms of the medical industry and become a leader.
Mm-hmm. And well, I guess the point, Andrew, you're making is that really what makes a country kind of become a superpower isn't just its industrial capabilities, but also its medicine.
100%. And it's generally one of the last areas of these newly industrialized economies to take off. So, for example, in South Korea, 20 years ago, the healthcare industry was pretty undeveloped. But as the country got richer, and when people do get richer, they're willing to spend more money, and they do spend more money on advanced healthcare. So that whole ecosystem sort of goes up. Although in South Korea, there's far too much cosmetic surgery done. I remember being up at, I think, Seoul National University Hospital, and one of the neurosurgeons was telling me we can't get young guys to do registrarships in neurosurgery because they want to go down at Apgujeong and do nose jobs and boob jobs because it's so lucrative. Everyone wants to have that K-pop look, and a lot of people from China were going over to South Korea and having that surgery done as well. And in fact, I was in Chengdu meeting with a bunch of local aesthetic plastic surgeons one time. Not a trip I wanted to make. I used to look after a range of products that was called SAM, S-A-M, which stood for subcutaneous augmentation material. And it was designed for facial-maxillary surgeons in the event of gunshot wounds, dog attacks, car accidents, where the face was injured and surgeons need to do reconstructive surgery. But these guys were using it off-label and not for its intended purpose. They were using it for aesthetic surgery. And they were quite unscrupulous, actually. So I recommended to my company at the time to shut that business down. And even though it was quite lucrative financially, they went ahead with that, and we exited that market in Asia to stop the off-label use, which was, again, quite unethical, But I think also, back to general hostility for a second, I think one of the reasons that Xi Jinping is sweating at the moment is because he's put himself into a corner in terms of COVID-19 management, and it's come at a great cost to his position and his power. And it's funny, it's the old medical economies, as it were, the UK, the US, that came up with efficacious vaccines in unprecedented time, because of their real strength in this space. And China's not been able to have as efficacious vaccines. They've not released phase 3 clinical trial data and so on. And so what were the tools in their arsenal? Well, they had to go to lockdowns. And so, but that's obviously not sustainable. Even Tedros has been saying that. He's tried to put a bit of space between himself and the Chinese regime for obvious reasons. But, I remember at the start of the pandemic, Italy was the only G7 country to sign on to Belt and Road. And she was saying to the Italians at the time, hey, we should include healthcare in Belt and Road, I think she fancies China as a healthcare player. And it's no disrespect to Chinese people. There are fantastic Chinese doctors all around the world. And they've been able to move very quickly in good medical technology, as I mentioned. But for all of those constraints, in terms of the Chinese system, they come home to roost in the healthcare space in very powerful ways. And that's why China's not ready to compete like for like against, the countries that have been doing it well for a long time.